Blessings and welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we are in Esther, finishing the book, chapters 5 through 10. Yesterday we started the book. A lot of good stuff coming out of Esther. Yesterday I pointed out several leadership flaws and character flaws of this king. And I didn't even attempt to say his name all day yesterday, but it was Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus. This comes into play because Mordecai has told Esther to go to the king and find out why the decree to kill all the Jews was signed into law. Now, Esther is the queen, but nobody could just walk up to the king in the throne room without an appointment or without being summoned. You couldn't just walk in. I mean, it was probably a highly secure area. And if you just walked in without an invitation or being called, you were subject to being executed. So Esther's reluctance to go in is not just because she's scared to talk to the king. I mean, this king has shown some very questionable ability to make good decisions. So, I mean, she could walk in and him look at her crossways and go, "You weren't invited, execute her," and it would be totally legal and could happen like that. That's where his judgment comes into play and why it was so difficult for her to go see the king. But she does. So 5:2, luckily she is allowed to walk in and the king sees her, man, and immediately he has favor on her. She's beautiful and he's like, "Come on in. What do you want? I'll give you anything you want, even up to half my kingdom," which apparently was just a common phrase. It didn't actually mean "I'll give you half of my kingdom." But in 5:5, Esther invites the king. When he says, "What do you want?" she says, "I want to invite you and Haman to dinner." And so he immediately sends for Haman, who is already very arrogant because of the graciousness of the king and the favor that's been shown to him. Well, this just continues to build Haman's pride and arrogance and ego, and it gets so inflated. You wonder why it doesn't just burst with this big head. But anyway, in verse 13, this is a very telling verse because Haman says that all this favor does not compare to the hatred he has for Mordecai. I mean, if you see the things that are lavished on Haman, and he's number 2 in the kingdom, and all of a sudden he says, "None of this compares to my hatred." You understand the hatred that has just consumed him and fills him up. Even though he's a prideful, arrogant man, that hatred is just eating him up. We go to chapter 6. God has a cool plan and he's working it out. And then in verse 4, the timing and the drama of this rivals any kind of Shakespearean play or any of the most dramatic scenes you could ever see in a movie theater. Verse 6, Haman's arrogance is about to get the best of him. And in Proverbs 16:18, we see that pride comes before the fall. And Haman's pride seems to be at the apex. And then the question's asked. The king says, "What should I do for the man whom I favor?" And in his arrogance, Haman thinks he's obviously talking about me because I'm the greatest. So he says, "I'd put a robe on him. A robe that you've worn, O king. I'd let him ride a horse that you have ridden." And these things are symbolically put him right up there with the king, wearing the king's clothes, riding the king's horse. So he's putting himself right up there with the king, almost equal. But the king, in his inability to make his own decisions, and instead of just doing what he said he was going to do, asking other people what they think, he says, "Oh, wow, great idea. Go do it." Now Haman's like, "Go do it." "Yeah, go take Mordecai, who saved me from assassination," I found out last night because I couldn't sleep and I had some of the scribes read off some of our history to me. "Go take him." How humiliating. This is the worst day ever for Haman. So he goes and he does it. And then Esther, they go in to see her that evening. And I'm sure he's just distraught, but he's trying to put on a good face for this dinner with Esther and the king. It's just the three of them, well, and his guards. And then Esther reveals it's Mordecai who wants to kill her and all her people. And it hits the fan. Mordecai they put a cloth over his face and take him out of there. As the king comes out in a rage, and he makes decisions in a rage, again, something a king shouldn't do, but he walks out and he sees this big, the gallows that Haman made to hang Mordecai on. And the king says, "What's that all about?" And they said, "Well, that's what Haman made to hang Mordecai from." And the king says, "Well, hang him from it." And so he does. Mordecai, then, like I said, the king just makes some weird decisions. All of a sudden he says, "Well, Mordecai, don't even really know you. I don't know that I ever met you, but I'm going to make you number two. You're going to take Haman's place and all his possessions. You're number two in all the country now. What do you want?" And Mordecai says, "Well, why don't you make me a rule?" And so the king says, "Well, here's my signet ring. Write out whatever you want. Stamp it, and it's official." Well, I mean, it's great that he does this for Mordecai and the Jews, but I'm just blown away that a king or a leader does this. Mordecai protects the Jews. They get more power than they've ever had. People revere them now. Mordecai continues to grow in authority and power in the kingdom, and it's no wonder. I mean, if you can manipulate a king to do whatever the heck you want, of course you're going to gain more and more power. And the kingdom probably became more stable because Mordecai was at the helm and not the king. So anyway, just a great, great story. Tomorrow we're in Ezra chapters 7 and 8. So I hope you read ahead. Come back here and let's get a law enforcement takeaway. Until then, you guys be safe.